Hey guys. Tonight we begin under a watercolor dawn, standing at the top of a ziggurat as ancient Babylon slowly blinks itself awake. Below you, roofs of sun-dried mud brick stretch in every direction, flat, tidy, and sleepier than you are right now. The air is dry, the wind is soft, and the whole city seems to sigh as the stars begin their daily fade into memory. You're standing here barefoot, probably too close to the edge for comfort, but it doesn't matter. The city below is humming with a rhythm older than alarm clocks or Google calendars. You're about to see how some of the earliest timekeepers decided it was time to eat lunch, not by a bell or a sundial, but by watching the stars themselves. Oh, and spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't last long in this world. The sun is harsh, the math is confusing, and they do not care if your Fitbit is dead. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take one slow step forward and feel the gentle grit of baked brick underfoot. It's still cool from the night. Ahead of you stands a low wall, etched with patterns that once told stories, most of them probably about the weather, the gods, or both. The view from up here? Pretty impressive. You can see the Euphrates in the distance, winding like a sleepy snake past wheat fields and patches of green. Babylon isn't a myth yet. It's just your home this morning. Beside you, an elderly man kneels and squints at the sky with the intensity of someone trying to remember where they left their sandals. He holds a smooth clay tablet in one hand and a stylus in the other. You glance over his shoulder. It's covered in tiny, wedge-shaped cuneiform, the kind of writing that looks like it was invented by someone really into corners. He sighs, makes a tiny mark, and nods with satisfaction. You, naturally, have no idea what he's just written, but based on how smug he looks, you assume it's something brilliant. Possibly. Confirmed. Jupiter is being punctual today. The Babylonians didn't have wristwatches, but they had a sky that never lied. And they used it with a level of precision that still makes modern historians grumble into their coffee. You look up. The stars are fading fast, but a few are still visible in the western sky. Pinpricks of cold light in a warming blue canvas. Somewhere up there is Lugal, the king star. Probably Jupiter, probably. Historians still argue whether the Babylonian name Mul-Lugal always referred to Jupiter or if it shifted based on context. But you don't care. It's just nice to watch something move that isn't trying to sell you anything. A bird cries overhead, some kind of sleepy desert gull, and you realize the city is slowly coming to life. A temple bell chimes. Somewhere below, a woman is sweeping a rooftop with a reed broom. The scent of warm bread begins to creep upward through the alleys like a whisper. Someone just pulled their first batch out of a clay oven, and you wish you'd brought a snack. And yet, no one here is rushing. There's a schedule, sure, but it's woven into the rhythm of the stars. You climb down from the ziggurat slowly, stepping onto each tier with care. Each level once held offerings, burned incense, or bored apprentices waiting for their mentor to stop ranting about Saturn's bad attitude. Now, it's mostly dust and pigeons. At the base, you see a group of scribes gathered in a shaded alcove. Their wooden desks are simple, their tablets stacked like pancakes. You settle in near them. One glances up and mutters something that sounds like, "The moon's running late again," which might be a joke, or might be very literal. These scribes are trying to track planetary movement with 0 telescopes and lots of math. It's slow work, but it's also the foundation of every calendar you've ever used. Someone else is talking about Sirius rising in the mouth of the fish, which sounds mystical, but mostly just means lunch should happen soon. Or maybe not. Depending on the season, that star can rise just after sunrise, or before it, or not at all. The lunch conversation, oddly, was serious business. The timing of midday meals mattered in religious rituals, market hours, and even military drills. People didn't just guess when it was time to eat. They waited for the stars, or the priests who interpreted them, to give the signal. Because nothing says meal prep like checking if Venus is grumpy. You wander off a little, stepping through the alley beside the temple wall. There, a boy sits on a basket of dates, popping one into his mouth every few minutes and squinting upward. He points at the horizon and says, "That one, when it's straight, I go home." You nod, pretending to understand. It's all wonderfully inefficient, and somehow still more poetic than your smartphone's alarm. Up above, the last visible star begins to dim, giving in to the weight of morning light. A man nearby stands, stretches his arms, and yawns wide enough to wake a god. "Midday's not far," he murmurs. He could be guessing, but chances are he's right. You don't remember dozing off, but when you blink your eyes open, the moon has shifted. It now pours light directly across the curve of the Yakchal, throwing long shadows onto the ground like ribbons of soft ink. The air outside is even cooler, and for a moment, it's easy to forget you're standing in one of the driest places on Earth. You step back from the entrance and look up at the dome again, admiring its surreal silhouette. There are no modern lines here, no symmetry, no right angles, just graceful, ancient curves shaped by sun-dried bricks, layered with a patience that most of us no longer practice. Each brick placed by hand, each curve smoothed with a wet palm. The structure looks oddly delicate, but it's lasted centuries. You make your way back inside the dome. The stillness wraps around you like a heavy blanket. Your feet echo on the stone floor, muffled by straw that's still tucked here and there, remnants of the insulation method used to pack and protect the ice. The Persians didn't just store ice here, they made it. That's the bit that always catches people off guard. You don't drag ice through the desert to this spot. No, you make it. Right here. Or rather, just outside. You step out again and walk slowly around the Yakchal's base. And there it is, a shallow walled basin, dry now, but unmistakably shaped to hold a thin sheet of water. The basin is long, rectangular, and only a few inches deep. On winter nights, water would be poured into this depression, exposed to the open sky where temperatures could plummet. And it worked. The basin was carefully placed in the shadow of the dome and oriented away from sunlight. That meant it stayed cold longer. Cold desert air did the rest, freezing the water into large, fragile sheets. At dawn, the ice would be broken up and hauled inside, layered with straw and burlap, and buried deep in the Yakchal's pit. It sounds so simple, but it took clever math and deep experience to know how to place things just right. This wasn't an amateur hour backyard science project. It was calibrated, intentional, a kind of low-tech precision that's both humbling and, let's be honest, a little annoying, given how your fridge can barely keep ice cream from getting freezer burn. You imagine the work. You picture a small team of laborers in thick wool robes, stomping around in the pre-dawn cold, hauling water from a nearby kanat, pouring it gently into the basin with wooden buckets, and watching the sky as if they could will the frost into being. One slips. Splash. A muttered curse. Another yells over the wind, "Don't pour too much, it won't freeze." A third, the oldest, nods sagely and points to a crack in the ice from yesterday. It's a minor flaw, but they'll remember it, learn from it, because every crack is a lesson in physics, even if no one calls it that yet. Historians still debate just how widespread this system was. Were yakhchals only built in royal cities, or were they tucked into towns across Persia? Some argue they were mostly elite structures. Others say there were smaller versions owned by merchant families. Archaeological records are sketchy. The domes are durable, yes, but records? Less so. Still, the engineering speaks for itself. These things weren't lucky guesses. They were deliberate. You return to the basin and crouch low. In your mind's eye, water glistens again. Cold wind whips across the surface. Frost creeps along the edge like some tiny white animal stalking the center. Slowly, slowly. If you had enough time, you could probably hear the crackling freeze begin. And here's the fun part. This wasn't just a winter trick. Some yakhchals stored ice all the way into late summer. That means the ice harvested in January or February could still be used in July or August, if the storage was done just right. You imagine a hot summer day in ancient Persia. The marketplace is shimmering with heat. Children are half limp with sun exhaustion. And then, some lucky noble walks by with a chilled pomegranate sorbet in a silver bowl. A glistening, frosty miracle. You can almost hear the scandalized whispers. She must have connections to the royal ice pit. Or maybe it's sorcery. More likely, it's clever logistics. Blocks of ice packed deep in the yakhchal, under layers of straw, behind doors that only open after sunset. A cold secret kept by architecture and discipline. As you stand again, brushing your hand across the edge of the dry basin, you notice the tiniest slope in the stonework. It's designed to drain any melting water into a tiny side channel, because even here, waste isn't tolerated. Water is sacred. Every drop matters. The Persians understood this better than most. And for a culture that thrived in dry lands, the idea of shaping ice from nothing but air, stone, and patience, that's alchemy. Real, slow alchemy. It's no wonder poets and mystics grew up here. You hear a faint howl of wind in the distance, or maybe it's just the air moving through one of the old ventilation shafts near the top of the dome. Either way, it sounds like the land whispering old instructions. How to survive with less, how to stay cool without power, and how to build something that doesn't just fight the environment, but dances with it. You exhale slowly. It's time to head toward the next curve in the story. But the yakhchal, it's already working its spell. You wander toward the outer edges of the city, where the sky opens up wider and fewer buildings clutter your view of the heavens. The sun is climbing now, not yet harsh, but no longer polite. You pass a sleepy goat tied to a post, a basket of figs resting beside a door, and a young girl drawing a star in the dust with a stick. She hums softly, something half lullaby, half prayer. Even the smallest children here grow up looking upward. You pause at a small courtyard, shaded by woven reed mats strung across the rooftops. A man sits cross-legged in the center, surrounded by scrolls and clay tablets, and just behind him, on a little wooden shelf, is a painted ceramic figure. Big eyes, elaborate beard, holding a tiny star. It's Mul Lugal, Jupiter. Though the name literally means great king, it's less about monarchy and more about authority, time, judgment, and, oddly, bread. You sit down across from him. He doesn't look up, just grunts softly and points toward the eastern horizon. He's late, he says. Who? You ask. He finally lifts his head, and for a moment, he squints at you like you're the one made of fired clay. The king of time, he says, tapping the ceramic figure. Ah, he scratches a note onto a soft slab of clay. He was due 3 fingers above the wall by second hour. But clouds. He waves a dismissive hand at the sky. Uncooperative. You glance upward. The sky's mostly clear, but there's a faint wisp, the kind that's more decorative than disruptive. Still, when your entire lunch schedule hinges on a planet's punctuality, a little haze can be a disaster. Babylonian astronomers tracked Jupiter obsessively. It wasn't just a big, shiny dot. It was a timepiece. Its appearance and position helped determine market hours, ceremonial meals, and even official state business. There are surviving tablets that record Jupiter's movement over periods longer than 70 years. That's dedication. Or boredom. Possibly both. You watch as the man reaches for a bowl of lentils, but pauses, waiting. You wait with him. Historians still argue, he says suddenly, whether the star told us to eat, or whether we ate, and then said the star gave permission. You blink. He's not wrong. After all, it's hard to know where precision ends and ritual begins. Did the stars truly schedule everything? Or did humans just like the idea that something grand and cosmic agreed with their lunchtime? A sharp bird call interrupts your thoughts. You look up just in time to see a black-winged ibis flapping across the courtyard. The man scowls. That bird always ruins everything. You stifle a laugh. He finally breaks the lentil crust and offers you a bite. It's warm, spiced with something that smells like coriander and mystery. Not bad for a meal approved by a planet. In the next courtyard over, you hear an argument bubbling into the open air. "That wasn't Jupiter," someone shouts. "It was too. It's brighter than Mars." You say that about every star you forget the name of. A door slams. A clay cup clatters. You shake your head gently. So even in Babylon, stargazing wasn't always a calm, scholarly affair. Sometimes it involved raised voices and star-based accusations. You walk away from the courtyard and find yourself along a quiet canal. The water reflects the brightening sky, its surface only broken by the occasional leaf or ripple from a lazy fish. A young apprentice sits on the bank, legs dangling, nose deep in a palm leaf scroll. "Tracking Lugal?" you ask. He nods. Trying to chart when he passed the goat star last year, to predict when he'll do it again. You raise an eyebrow. And what happens when he does? The apprentice shrugs. Depends who you ask. Some say good fishing. Others say diarrhea. He says it completely deadpan. You're unsure which part he believes. Maybe both. You lean back, letting your fingers trail along the warm stone ledge of the canal. The apprentice mumbles measurements under his breath, something about finger widths, arc spans, and night hours. His scroll rustles softly in the breeze. Behind you, the temple bell chimes once, then again. You check the sky. Jupiter is no longer visible. Too bright now, but that doesn't stop the ritual. Back in the courtyard, the astronomer is now scraping dates into a bowl. You hear the clink of bronze cups, the shuffle of sandals, the sigh of a scribe who's finally accepted that clouds are part of the job. You catch a whiff of warm bread again, this time with sesame. You close your eyes. In your mind, the planet Lugal rolls across the heavens like a slow, celestial dinner bell. It's a dance you'll never fully understand, but one that makes perfect, sleepy sense while sitting by the water. And somewhere in the margins of a clay tablet, someone is writing, "When Lugal cleared the fish's jaw, the people ate. Because when the stars nod, you eat." You wake to the soft thunk of a date falling into the canal. Somewhere nearby, a priest is muttering about Orion's left foot being unusually smug this morning. You're not sure what that means, but it's probably not a compliment. The sky's gone from pale gold to full daylight now, and the real heavy lifting of the Babylonian day has begun. You stretch, crack your neck gently, and follow the sound of voices toward a broad, sunny square that serves as the neighborhood gathering spot. A few stalls are already packing up, not because they've sold out, but because Orion just told them it's time. At least according to Dumuzi, who runs the melon stall near the west corner and has been watching Orion since before breakfast. You wander over and nod. He nods back, hands you a small piece of melon. "Orion's winking again," he says. You glance at the sky, squinting through the brightness. "Is that good?" He shrugs. "Depends on the shoulder." You take a bite. It's surprisingly cold somehow, and refreshingly sweet. The kind of bite that makes you momentarily consider moving here permanently, until you remember the lack of modern plumbing and air conditioning. Dumuzi tells you that when Orion tilts just so, casting his faintest morning shadow across the third brick of the temple courtyard, it's the signal for midday pause. Not because it's the hottest hour, though it often is, but because centuries of observation convinced people that the heavens needed everyone to sit down for a while. And who are you to argue with the sky? You walk slowly toward the temple again. This time, instead of climbing, you stay low and follow the narrow alleys that wrap around the base of the ziggurat like quiet fingers. The streets are cooling under shadow now, as the massive structure blocks the worst of the sun. It's here that you meet an old man in a long robe, barefoot, humming softly. He's holding a string tied to a stick. Curious, you stop and tilt your head. Without breaking his rhythm, he lowers the stick into a slot between the bricks and waits. Then he pulls it out, measures the shadow with his hand, and mutters, "Too early." "Too early for what?" you ask. "For bread." Fair. The Babylonians were masters of multiple timekeeping techniques, and while the stars were their crown jewels, they also used backup plans, shadow measurements, water clocks, even knotted ropes. This string and stick method, a kind of poor man's gnomon, a shadow-casting tool used for judging the angle of the sun. It's imprecise, but handy if the stars are hiding, or if you don't have a temple grant. He tries again, pulls the string, measures, frowns. Still too early. You offer a quiet nod, and move on, careful not to step on his carefully drawn lines in the dirt. Not far from him, a group of children is gathered around a woman drawing constellations on a slab of wet clay. She etches Orion, this time with comically large feet, and they giggle as she adds an extra star for the lazy elbow. You sit near them, watching. The woman explains to the children how each star has a name, a mood, and sometimes a preference for particular meals. "Venus likes sweets," she says, deadpan. "Jupiter likes stew." A child raises a hand. "What about the moon?" "The moon," she says, "likes to change her mind." The kids nod, like that makes perfect sense. You smile. Historians still argue about how deeply myth and measurement were intertwined in Babylonian daily life. Did they separate scientific observation from religious interpretation? Or was it all one seamless, star-soaked fabric? Honestly, from where you're sitting, it's hard to tell, and that's kind of the charm. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine Orion's belt hanging low in the night sky. 3 perfect dots strung across the heavens like the world's sleepiest ellipsis. Back in the marketplace, someone rings a bowl with a wooden stick. Lunch hour is over. Just like that. The signal isn't formal, but it carries. A few stalls creak open again. A fishmonger groans dramatically and lifts a sleepy carp from a pot. A seamstress pats her knees, stands, and picks up her needle. Time marches on, not with gears and alarms, but with a whisper from the stars and a flick of melon juice on your chin. You wander past a corner shrine where an offering dish holds 5 figs, a bit of salt, and what looks like a folded scroll. Maybe it's a lunch menu for the gods. Maybe it's a poem. You don't open it. The air smells of cumin and wet clay. At the base of the ziggurat, a tablet is being pressed by a young apprentice. He's clumsy, smudging the neat wedges with his sleeve. His master hovers nearby, arms crossed. "If you mistake Mars for Saturn again, you'll be eating dinner with the goats." The boy mumbles an apology. You'd feel bad, but you also mixed up Mars and Saturn once, and you still have the dream about it. You turn back toward the canal as the sky continues its slow, deliberate tilt. The stars may be hiding now, but their fingerprints are all over the rhythm of this place. And lunch? Lunch is over. Not because your stomach says so, but because Orion nodded. Just once. With the good shoulder. You find yourself walking once more toward the inner sanctum of the city, feet padding across sun-warmed stones, every step slower than the last. The shade thickens between buildings now, and the wind carries the scent of baked brick, stale incense, and something a little fishy, probably a gift from the Euphrates. Babylon isn't in a rush. It never is, especially not after lunch. As you cross into the temple complex, your ears catch the familiar hush of ceremonial spaces. It's not silence exactly. It's more like the city holds its breath for a moment. A few barefoot priests shuffle across the tiled floor ahead of you, their linen robes trailing like soft echoes. You pause beneath a stone lintel etched with glyphs and stars, symbols that seem more decorative than decipherable. One of them vaguely resembles a jellyfish with attitude, but you're told it represents a summer constellation associated with fertility. Naturally, this temple isn't for just any god. It's the House of Nabu, the patron of wisdom, writing, and among other things, accurate celestial reports. Nabu's priests are serious about star tracking and timing, and keeping their sandals from squeaking during sunrise rituals. Inside, it's cool, dim. You step carefully over the threshold and into a large open courtyard. On one side, a trio of priests kneels in front of what looks like a sunlit grid scratched into the floor. On the other, a tall pole leans at an angle, casting a shadow across a ceramic disc dotted with inky circles. A young girl watches nearby, eating a piece of flatbread. You glance at her. She points with a smirk. When the shadow hits the frog, it's time for my uncle to stop talking. She's not joking. The frog is one of several hand-painted symbols scattered across the disc. There's also a fish, a jug, and something that might be a disappointed goose. It's not a formal sundial in the modern sense. It's more of a mnemonic, a way to map shadow positions to local activities, priestly duties, or, apparently, end-of-lecture warnings. You walk slowly around the grid, stepping quietly past a priest who's deep in concentration, eyes fixed on the thin shadow crawling across the stone. He doesn't notice you, or if he does, he doesn't care. His whole body is oriented toward the heavens, even if the sky is out of view. He's watching the reflection of the light, the evidence, the echo of the star above. Babylonians didn't always stare directly at the sky to track time. Sometimes they measured the shadows, stars left behind. Indirect, silent proof that something sacred had passed overhead. One priest clears his throat, places a small clay figurine in the shadow's path, and mutters a phrase you don't catch. It might be a prayer, or possibly just a note for future scribes. Don't schedule meetings during goat eclipse. Historians still argue whether these courtyard observations were religious in nature or purely astronomical. Did the symbols mean something deeper? Were they tools, or were they symbols disguised as tools? The lines between fact and faith blur here, and frankly, No one seems too bothered by that. In one corner of the temple, there's a basin of water. Still, clear, and placed beneath an open skylight. You peer into it and see the reflection of the sun, just a shard, and the faintest ghost of a star, barely visible in daylight. A priest notices you and nods approvingly. "Some stars stay," he says, tapping the water's surface gently, "even when they shouldn't." You wonder if he means the star or himself. A bell rings, 2 soft tones, followed by a pause, then one more. You look to the priests. None of them move. The girl eating bread finally stands. "Uncle's done," she says, brushing crumbs from her tunic. "Now we get to go home." She waves at you as she leaves. You wander deeper into the temple complex now, through a corridor lined with hanging oil lamps. Their flames flicker gently despite the still air, casting tall shadows on the smooth plaster walls. On each, a painted diagram, stars in positions, moons beside numbers, curved lines arcing toward mysterious symbols. It's not chaos. It's a system, an elegant, obsessive, profoundly human system. You pause at one mural showing a priest holding up a bowl of stew beneath a crescent moon. The bowl is labeled. So is the moon. There's a date. There's even a note that seems to say, in effect, "Do not eat beans after this star disappears." You nod. Sage advice. Emerging from the corridor, you find yourself in a smaller chamber. Just one priest here. He's younger, maybe not yet trusted with the sacred shadows. He's arranging tiny clay figurines on a low table, each representing a constellation. There's a goat, a lion, a bird, and something that looks like a confused tree stump. He glances up. "We use them for teaching," he says, gesturing, "so children can learn the hours." You look more closely. The figures are arranged in a circle with a tiny sun figurine set in the center, a teaching tool, or maybe a game, or maybe both. Time, here, is something you learn not by the ticking of seconds, but by the turning of the sky and the dance of clay. And shadow. There are no alarms, no countdowns, no digital reminders, just quiet attention, a tilt of the head, a shadow crawling across stone. You exit the temple slowly, squinting into the afternoon light. The streets are quieter now. Many have gone indoors to rest. A few children still play in the dust, chasing each other with sticks shaped like constellations. One pauses and points upward. "Look! The frog's awake!" You don't see it, but you believe her. You let the afternoon sun warm your shoulders as you follow a narrow footpath that leads away from the temple and into the bustle of the open-air market. The sky overhead is pale blue now, so bright it seems to buzz. You squint upward out of habit, but the stars are all hiding, tucked behind a curtain of daylight. Still, their schedules echo through everything down here. Stalls brim with spices, jugs of oil, heaps of barley. Baskets of cucumbers glisten in the heat. A vendor arranges dates with almost religious precision. Another one snores gently behind a table of flatbreads, a cloth covering his face to block the sun, and maybe, just maybe, to ignore his responsibilities. You take it slow, weaving between stands, your fingers brushing the edge of a linen robe, your ears catching stray bits of barter chatter. 3 shekels? It was 2 when the moon touched the fish's tail. Don't try that. Not my fault. The moon's greedy this month. A man waves a clay tablet in the air, shaking it at a bemused customer. Proof, he says. The moon says I open after market hour 3, which is not now. You smile. Even here, even in the sticky, sun-washed chaos of buying and selling, time is woven into the sky. Not the sun overhead, not only that, but the quieter dance of constellations and lunar nudges scribbled onto tablets. You find a shaded corner near a small canal, where fish blink lazily at the surface. There's a vendor here you've seen before, an old woman selling soup in clay bowls, each topped with a dried fig. She stirs her pot with the kind of deliberate slowness that suggests she's not in a hurry, even if you are. Which you're not. You sit. She nods. No words exchanged. A bowl is ladled, a fig is placed, and you're handed lunch with the sort of grace normally reserved for sacred offerings. You notice her glance upward, not at the sun, not even at the sky, but at the long, drooping shadow of a fig tree behind you. "That's my clock," she says. You turn. The shadow does indeed stretch perfectly over a small stone marker, one engraved with a fish and a crescent. "Moon passed the fish's mouth 2 nights ago," she explains, as though you should know what that means. You don't, but you nod anyway. Historians still argue about how ordinary Babylonian citizens understood these celestial timings. Did everyone carry around memorized star maps, or did they just listen to the temple bells and shout at the sky when something looked weird? There's no clear answer. The surviving tablets tell us what the scholars knew, but the bread sellers, the laundry washers, the kids with frogs carved into their toys, they left fewer records. Still, it's obvious something stuck. Even soup schedules got written in the stars. A boy walks past you carrying a tray of dried dates, balancing it expertly with one hand and shading his eyes with the other. He mutters as he passes, "Venus says no discounts today." A few moments later, another vendor counters from across the way. "Venus isn't in charge of discounts, you lump." They argue half-heartedly. You sip your soup. The sun shifts slightly, and across the plaza, a bell rings once. Soft, clear, and oddly melodic. A bell like that doesn't mean much in your world. But here it says, "Market Hour 2 is ending. Prepare for Market Hour 3. A weirdly bureaucratic thing to announce with such beauty. Vendors begin to shuffle their wares, not pack up, just reorganize. Someone lifts a box onto a slightly higher platform. Another reties their awning. A date seller scribbles something in the dust, a rough star with a dot in the middle. You finish your soup. The fig is sweet and chewy. A bit dramatic, honestly. You leave the bowl with the vendor and rise with a stretch. Walking again, you find yourself beside a group of laborers resting under a faded canopy. They fan themselves with flat pieces of reed mat and pass around a jar of warm beer. It's the thick kind, practically soup. One of them notices you and points toward the eastern horizon. "See that notch between the buildings?" You follow his finger. A tiny V-shaped gap between 2 rooftops frames the sky perfectly. "When Antares lands in that gap," he says, "we go back to work." You nod. "What if it's cloudy?" He grins. "Then we pretend we saw it, or we say it's a lucky star, and we rest longer." Fair enough. He leans back against a post and adds, "The foreman doesn't argue. He listens to stars more than people anyway." The group laughs gently, not too loud. The hour doesn't call for it. A donkey brays somewhere in the distance. A pottery shard clinks against the ground, and somewhere, another bell rings. But not one for humans. This one is hung near a pigeon coop, and its tone means it's time for the birds to fly. You watch as they rise in a fluttering burst, wings casting momentary shadows over the dusty square. The market's tone shifts again, softer now, less hustle, more murmur. The stars may be invisible in this bright afternoon heat, but everyone here is still living by them, still glancing sideways, checking shadows, watching sky gaps, measuring hours not by watches, but by memories of where Venus was last month. You pause beneath an awning and press your back to the wall. The clay is cool. A child runs past you holding a hoop and a stick, yelling something about chasing Saturn. You close your eyes, and for a brief moment, you can almost hear the heavens ticking, not with gears or grinding, just the slow drift of star against silence, calling everyone gently toward their next quiet task. You wander lazily away from the market, bellies full and shadows lengthening. The rhythm of the day now sinks into something quieter, slower. People speak more softly. Doors close with care. Even the wind has dialed down its ambition, settling for light caresses through linen curtains and rustling fig leaves that do little more than sigh. You follow a winding path that skirts the canal, where fat reeds lean into the water like sleepy sentinels. A man in a squat wooden boat is floating without direction, eyes closed, head tilted back toward the sky. In his hand is a folded parchment, and on that parchment, a chart predicting lunar phases and something labeled mysteriously, possible rain tears. You don't ask. Instead, you pause at a shaded stone bench beside the water. An older woman is already there, legs tucked under her, tracing symbols into a tablet with a reed stylus. She doesn't look up, but speaks as though she knows you are coming. "Eclipse coming soon," she says, calm as tea. "Could ruin lunch again." You nod solemnly. No one wants cosmic interference with their meal plans. She sighs and adds, "Last one spooked the goats." That tracks. You ask what she's working on. She turns the tablet toward you. It's a star chart, sort of, but instead of just marking where the moon or sun will be, she's drawn a bowl beneath them. "Soup day," she explains. In ancient Babylon, eclipses weren't just astronomical events. They were seen as omens, interruptions, even celestial warnings, especially when they happened near mealtimes. You imagine a priest mid-bite suddenly noticing the moon starting to darken and saying something like, "Well, that's unfortunate." People often skipped meals entirely during eclipses. Some buried their food. Some left offerings under trees. Others simply stared at the sky and tried not to blink too fast. Historians still debate the seriousness of eclipse-related fasts. Were they mandated rituals, or just overly cautious snack decisions? One theory suggests that on days with predicted eclipses, temple kitchens would adjust their menu in case the gods disapproved of stewed onions during celestial disturbances. You look at the woman, and what happens if people eat anyway? She shrugs. Gas? Probably. She's joking. You think. You walk further, into a quiet plaza, where 3 astrologers are gathered around an open scroll. They speak in low tones. You can hear phrases like shadow hour overlap, danger of barley spoil, and Venus will be too forward. One of them shakes his head, taps the scroll, and says, "If the moon slips under the horn star before the bread cools, we skip olives." You nod. Of course. You sit on a stone step, watching the scene unfold, like a play you've entered halfway through, but somehow still understand. One scholar lifts a polished bronze disc and holds it to the light, casting a beam toward a wall with a painted bull. The light lands neatly on the bull's eye. Everyone murmurs in agreement. Something has been confirmed, or predicted, or both. You yawn. The heat has mellowed. A boy walks past selling small jugs of cool barley water, and you take one. It tastes like dusty cereal and childhood. You love it. You follow the astrologers for a bit longer. They move toward a small shrine tucked behind a fig tree, where a sliver of moon, nearly invisible in the sky, has been marked on the wall with a tiny smear of ash. There they sit, They do not speak. One of them opens a folded cloth and removes a bit of dried bread and a single plum. You realize this is their eclipse meal, simple, quiet, designed not to offend whatever celestial mechanics are about to be disrupted. You sit with them, sipping barley water, nibbling a corner of your bread. No one announces anything. No bell. No chant. And then, ever so slowly, the light begins to shift. It's subtle at first. The air doesn't cool, but it feels heavier. A hush falls across the square, like even the stones are listening. Someone murmurs, "It begins," and you look up. The moon's edge, barely visible moments ago, is now touched by shadow. A soft, unnatural curve begins to grow, darkening its silver face bit by bit. It's not fast, it's not dramatic, but it's steady. You've read about this, watched clips, maybe even made a cardboard viewer as a child. But this is different. This is ancient. This is expected. You feel it in your ribs. A strange tug. Beside you, the oldest astrologer exhales. "No stew for me today." You don't question it. When the eclipse reaches its midpoint, you hear a single bird cry out, and then fall silent. Not in fear, just observance. Even the animals, it seems, are running on celestial time. Eventually, the shadow begins to recede. The moon breathes light again. The weight lifts from the plaza. The astrologers stand. They bow toward the moon. And then, they unfold a small basket containing flatbread and a soft goat cheese wrapped in fig leaves. "That was lunch," one says. "Now it's real lunch." You walk away slowly, your stomach full of barley, and your head full of shadow and stars. You pass a group of temple guards leaning against a wall, one of them drowsily chewing on an almond. "Eclipses," he mutters, "always make me tired." You agree. It's probably the soup, or the moon, or both. The sun is starting to mellow, a soft gold brushing the walls of Babylon, like a lazy painter who's decided today doesn't need a second coat. You find yourself drifting through the narrow back lanes of the residential quarters, where baked mud walls lean slightly, as if nodding off, and woven mats flutter gently in open windows. Here, the rhythm is even slower. People speak in murmurs. A dog yawns in the shade of a fig tree, and from somewhere behind a screen of reeds, you hear the clinking of pottery and the unmistakable sound of someone stirring stew. You follow your nose. Around a quiet corner sits a cluster of stone benches circling a communal hearth. A pot bubbles softly in the center, tended by two elderly women who talk to each other as if their conversation has never stopped. Not overnight, not over seasons, not since Venus last dipped below the horizon. You sit quietly nearby, not intruding, but not hidden either. They're talking about omens again. Not the dramatic kind. No thunderbolts or royal curses here. Just Venus, who they say seems unusually bold today. You glance skyward, even though Venus is long gone from view. They don't need to see her. "She was twinkling at me during prayer," one woman says. "You sure it wasn't a beetle?" the other replies. They both laugh, not unkindly. Just like people who've had time to forget how to take things too seriously. Then the conversation turns to stew. This isn't just any stew. This is barley stew, the kind you've heard whispered about since arriving. It's thick, rich, and utterly dependent on the stars for its ingredients. No, really. You ask. The older of the two, eyes like polished stone, nods. "We don't cook lentils when Mars is bright. Makes the stomach stubborn." You blink. "And no leeks. she adds, if Aldebaran is peeking near the goat star. Last time I did, poor Idun lost his voice for a week. You glance around. No Idun in sight. Just the bubbling pot. Historians still debate how much of Babylonian food culture was dictated by astrology. Some argue that diet-based omens were exaggerated by later writers. Others point out tablets where specific ingredients were explicitly listed alongside celestial positions. Either way, you're looking at two women who absolutely believe that Venus prefers coriander. And honestly, you're inclined to believe them. They offer you a bowl. You accept. It's hot, mildly spicy, and somehow earthy in a way that feels older than language. You sip carefully, as though interrupting the flavor might summon an unexpected eclipse. In the distance, a bell sounds, not from a temple this time, but from a clay wind chime shaped like a crescent. A breeze stirs. The women don't look up. That means the goats are done grazing, one of them says. You pause. The chime tells you that? She shakes her head. The chime rings when the breeze shifts from east to north. The goats always stop when that happens. The chime just helps us notice. You exhale through your nose, impressed. A child appears from behind a nearby wall, tugging a toy cart fashioned from scrap wood and twine. Inside it rides a small clay figure with exaggerated eyes and starburst-shaped hair. You ask who it is. The child shrugs. Probably Venus. Then adds, or my uncle. Fair. You finish your stew as the sky deepens just slightly. Still daylight, but the shadows are getting bolder, longer, more opinionated. The women begin to pack up their cooking supplies. Not in a rush, just methodically, like everything else in this city. One wipes the rim of the stew pot with a cloth soaked in date vinegar. The other folds her reed mat with practiced flicks of the wrist. They speak of dreams now. Both had the same one. A silver fish jumping out of a moonlit pool. One says it means rain. The other says it means her cousin's son is finally getting married. You don't ask for clarification. The dream logic here obeys different rules. You rise, bow slightly, and walk away through the sleepy streets. Near a doorway, an old man is dozing upright, a clay tablet on his lap. The tablet is covered in star names and what looks like snack recommendations. You step closer and see the phrase, Lugal lo, equals soft cheese okay. Noted. The alleys begin to open back up into larger streets now. People move with more purpose, but no one is rushing. A vendor adjusts his fruit crates to catch the light. A girl turns a jug to line up its painted stars, with the real ones, soon to appear. Everywhere you look, the conversation continues, not with words, but with gestures. Glances skyward, quiet rearrangements of food and clay. You realize something as you walk. No one's really checking the time. They're reading it. Like a book, like a poem, like a story told by the sky. And right now, the sky is whispering, dinner's coming soon. So people listen, not to clocks, but to stars, wind, stew, and chimes. You feel your own breath sinking to it, slow, even, perfectly unhurried. You keep moving as the day dips further toward twilight, the light mellowing into that soft golden hue that flatters every stone wall and dust-covered jug in the city. Babylon looks almost like it's blushing, as if aware that the stars will soon return to watch it from above. A shepherd passes you, whistling quietly, a thin stick tapping rhythm against his calf as his goats amble behind. They're not in a hurry either. They move like old friends who've done this path 1,000 times and plan to do it 1,000 more. You fall into step behind them. The shepherd hums a melody you don't recognize. It rises and falls like the shape of a hill you've never climbed. He glances at you. "Red stars climbing," he says, gesturing toward the east. "Time for the goats to nap." You glance that way. Nothing yet, but a faint blush in the sky hints at what he means. "Aldebaran," he adds. "The bullseye." That one you know. Aldebaran was one of the most important stars in the Babylonian sky. Bright, red, and strangely punctual. Shepherds believed it signaled rest, not just for themselves, but for their animals. Some said it pulsed with a calming energy, soothing nervous livestock. Others insisted it just gave goats an excuse to lie down. You watch as the goats do exactly that. One plops dramatically into the dust with a theatrical sigh, like a diva at the end of a long soliloquy. The shepherd smiles. She always pretends to be tired when he's rising. He settles beside a low wall and pulls out a small clay tablet from a satchel. It's not official, just a personal journal of sorts. Star positions, nap times, weird goat behaviors, and one amusing drawing of what might be Mars wearing sandals. "I mark when the naps begin," he explains, "and when they don't." You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. "Patterns. The sky writes everything first." Historians still argue whether everyday workers like shepherds truly followed star calendars, or if that's just something priests liked to believe. But there are enough records, etched deep into clay, passed down in stories, to suggest these patterns mattered. Not in a rigid, scientific way, but in the rhythm of life. A goat's yawn could be a kind of astronomy, if you looked at it the right way. You sit beside him. The air is cooler now. Not cold, just relieved. He points at the sky again. "That red one. When it hits the tip of the fig tree, I get 10 more minutes." You look at the tree. It's true. Aldebaran is climbing. Slowly, casually, but it's definitely headed for that branch. You both sit in silence, counting breaths between stars. A small child appears from behind the tree, dragging a blanket and a ceramic animal. Maybe a cow, maybe a turtle. She doesn't speak, just crawls into the shepherd's lap and tucks herself in. "Is she yours?" you ask. He shakes his head. "She belongs to the tree. I just borrow her sometimes." That makes sense. He points to another star. "That one means we should be telling stories, but I'm too tired." You smile. "Maybe later." He nods. A goat bleats softly in its sleep, kicking one leg. The shepherd sighs. "That one dreams of Saturn. Always dramatic." You laugh, not loudly, just enough to let the breeze carry it. The child in his lap murmurs something about soup. No one responds. It's not the hour for soup anymore. Above, the sky continues its shift. Stars blink awake one by one, as if stirred gently from a long nap. You stand, stretching slowly, and begin to walk again. Further along the road, you pass a woman carrying a clay jug on her shoulder. Her pace is steady. Her eyes are skyward. When you draw level with her, she says, "The stars are whispering again." You glance up. What are they saying? She thinks for a moment. They want everyone to go inside. You nod. Are you going inside? She shrugs. Eventually. You part ways, and she disappears into the fading warmth of a side street. Ahead, you reach a small square where elders are sitting in a semicircle, watching the stars appear. One gestures at a triangle of stars near the horizon. "See that? That means tomorrow. We eat early." Another scoffs. "It meant that last time, and I got heartburn." A third waves them off. "Only if you mix chickpeas and dreams. Everyone knows that." You sit nearby, not part of the circle, but close enough to catch the warmth of their routine. One of them pulls out a folded cloth and reveals a small piece of dried apricot. He breaks it in half and offers you a piece without looking. You accept it like a secret. It tastes like sunlight that took its time. You ask quietly, "Do you really time your naps by the stars?" He smiles, crinkly and slow. "Of course not," he says. "The stars time us." And just like that, the triangle of stars tilts slightly westward. He leans back and closes his eyes. You wake to the sound of sandals brushing over stone and the gentle rustle of someone folding a mat nearby. The square is nearly empty now. Just you, a few lingering elders murmuring half-finished stories, and a cat doing its best to look mysterious next to a pile of cracked lentils. You stretch your arms, the cool air settling on your skin like a silk sheet left out under the moon. It's evening now, truly. The city has exhaled whatever urgency it had, and the stars are stepping in to keep time for whatever's left. You walk northward, where the homes get wider and the streets feel more rehearsed. This is the district near the Scholars' Quarter, where those trained in reading the heavens, the way others read family gossip, spend their nights poring over tablets by lamplight. You pause outside a low building with soft golden glow spilling out from within. The door is open. Inside, a family is seated on reed mats arranged around a clay lamp, its flame bouncing gently against the walls. A woman stirs something in a shallow dish while her daughter recites star names, quietly, as if trying not to wake the floor. You stand in the doorway. The woman looks up and waves you in. No one here is surprised by visitors. Babylon isn't a city of locked doors. It's a city of passing stars and passing guests. You sit. The room smells of honey, warm milk, and worn parchment. The daughter hands you a clay tablet. It's smooth, worn down by fingers, and marked with tiny dots arranged in careful spirals. "She's learning to tell time with the Pleiades," the mother explains. You nod. The Pleiades, also known as the Seven Sisters, was one of the Babylonians' favorite star clusters. Easily visible, regularly rising and setting, and mysteriously captivating. It became a kind of celestial Swiss Army knife, good for measuring seasons, meal times, planting schedules, and bedtime stories. The little girl points at one of the dots. "When this one is behind the goat star," she says, "we stop boiling things." You smile. "Always?" She nods solemnly. "Unless the moon is watching?" "Of course." The father enters, a tablet in his hand, eyes already halfway lost in thought. "I'm calculating when sunrise will land on the roofline again," he says, as if you asked. You didn't, but you're glad he's doing it anyway. He sets the tablet beside the lamp and makes a few notations with a reed stylus. You glance at it and recognize the little star shapes again. This tablet is older, thicker, with more layers of scratches and corrections. He taps one corner. "Here," he says. "Last year, this date, Lugal was 3 fingers above the ziggurat by the second hour. This year, he's late." You nod slowly. "Will that change breakfast?" He looks up. "Yes." Simple as that. The Babylonians were tracking celestial patterns with a precision that would make modern spreadsheets blush. Tablets have been found that charted planetary motion with uncanny accuracy, especially Jupiter and Venus. Lugal, as they call him, is never just a light in the sky. He's a timekeeper, a guest who never misses an appointment, even if he's fashionably late. The girl leans on your shoulder and whispers, "I don't like when he's late. It makes my soup taste weird." You don't ask if that's superstition or personal preference. Either way, it matters. The father adjusts the oil lamp slightly, and its light shifts across the tablet, revealing a faint etching you hadn't noticed before, a small, spiraling sun with 7 dots above it. It might be decoration, it might be a code, it might be lunch plans from 3 years ago. You ask, "Do you always eat at the same time?" The mother smiles. No, we eat when the stars say we're ready. You take a bite of the warm rice she offers. It's sweet, simple, satisfying. The kind of food that doesn't need permission, but waits for it anyway. The conversation turns toward comets, uninvited guests in the night sky. The father says one passed by last month, a smudge just over the northern gate. It confused the temple birds, he says, a touch too seriously. You ask what he means. He shrugs. They flew in circles, for hours. It was awkward. Historians still debate whether Babylonians saw comets as signs of doom or just celestial hiccups. Some texts imply terror. Others treat them as passing curiosities. Most agree that a comet during dinner was considered very rude. The girl brings out another tablet, this one smaller, curved slightly from where. On it, a diagram of a sky filled with tiny labels, like a pop quiz from the heavens. She points. That's the nap star. That's the soup star. That one. That's when my uncle gets grumpy. You look at her mom. She nods. Accurate. The lamp flickers again. The father yawns and closes his tablet with a dusty sigh. You rise to leave. They wave, not goodbye, just until the stars realign. Outside, the night is cooler now. You pull your tunic tighter. Overhead, the sky stretches wide, the constellations sharper than before. Aldebaran glows red. The Pleiades twinkle softly. Jupiter, Lugal, hovers near the horizon, fashionably late, as promised. And somewhere behind you, in a small clay room filled with food, family, and faint scratchings in ancient tablets, time continues to pass, the only way it knows how in Babylon. By starlight, soup, and silence, you drift away from the family home, your path lit by the gentle hush of the city's night. Babylon doesn't sleep like a modern city. It eases into rest the way a reed bends in slow wind. Nothing turns off. Nothing stops. The lights simply grow warmer. The streets lean quieter. Time, once again, becomes a suggestion whispered down by stars. Your feet carry you toward the palace quarter, where walls rise higher and surfaces gleam faintly in moonlight. You know you're getting closer when the scent of cedar oil and polished stone starts to overpower the usual baked clay perfume of the streets. Outside a low gate, 2 guards sit slouched against the wall, sharing a handful of dried dates and muttering about the moon's position like it owes them money. King's going to ask again, one says. For what? Asks the other. For sunrise. Early. A long pause. He knows that's not how it works, right? Another pause. He's still going to ask. You slip by with a small nod. They don't stop you. You don't look suspicious. No one in sandals and sleep in their eyes ever does. You round a corner and find a small group of scholars gathered under a shaded pavilion. Their robes are tidier than the scribes near the temple, and their tablets bear the wear and shine of people who handle them too much. One of them is pacing. He's expecting it earlier, she says. He specifically asked for dawn over the garden fountain. A man with elaborate braids rubs his temples. Tell him the sun doesn't take requests. She shrugs. Then you tell him. They all go silent. You sit nearby, unseen or unimportant, and listen. A bronze sphere hangs above them on a fine rope. It's not decorative. It's a gnomon, designed to catch the very first light of dawn and cast it precisely onto a painted star on the opposite wall. It hit the wrong star yesterday, someone mumbles. That's because Venus interfered. Oh, not this again. You tune out for a moment and glance up. The sky is rich now, layered with ink-blue gradients and blinking ancient lights. You spot the Big Dipper, or what you think is the Big Dipper. The Babylonians had a different name for it, probably something like the Plow of the Scribe, or the Loyal Goat Carrier. You decide you prefer their versions. Back beneath the gnomon, the scholars are now discussing backup plans. What if we mirror the angle of Aldebaran's rise and reflect it across the basin? We tried that last solstice. It turned the fish pink. Better than last time, when he thought the eclipse was a personal insult. You stifle a laugh. You learn something as you sit there. The king of Babylon, while not exactly in charge of the sun, likes to pretend he is. And it falls to these poor, sleep-deprived scholars to make the sun obey, or at least appear to obey. You imagine it. The royal breakfast table. Figs lined up in nervous little rows, steam rising from barley mash, and all eyes watching for that first golden shaft of light to hit the fountain. Just so. A second early? No one says anything. A second late? Somebody loses plum privileges. Historians still argue how seriously Babylonian kings took astrological consultation. Some say the rulers deferred completely to their star readers, refusing to wage war or plant trees without celestial approval. Others suggest that, like today, royal figures simply liked the aesthetic of the cosmos agreeing with them. Either way, someone always ended up pacing under a pavilion at night, holding a stylus and whispering to the moon for backup. You look around. The gnomon swings slightly in the breeze. The scholars are comparing notes now, pointing at overlapping diagrams of moonrise paths, shadow casts, and what looks suspiciously like a recipe for sesame cakes on the back of one tablet. One mutters, "We'll try the mirrored water basin again, but if it reflects into the dog star instead of the goat, I'm blaming Tammuz." "I'm not even on that shift," Tammuz says flatly. "Exactly." As the conversation drifts into celestial triangulation and logistical grumbling, you step away. You're not here to run the palace. You're here to watch Babylon breathe under the stars. And so you find your way to the outer garden, where palms nod politely in the night breeze and narrow channels of water snake between patches of perfumed herbs. You find a bench, low and worn, and sit beneath a pomegranate tree that might have been planted during the reign of someone whose name only survives because it was etched into a brick no one could reach. Above, Jupiter glows steady. Venus has long since dipped beneath the horizon, probably off sulking after her chaotic cameo earlier. Saturn hangs like a paper lantern in the east. You imagine a servant slipping through the garden in the pre-dawn hours, placing a bowl of chilled water beside the king's chair, timing it just as Lugal crests the horizon. You imagine the king pausing mid-bite and saying, "Perfect. The stars obey me." You smile to yourself. Somewhere back in the pavilion, someone has just realized the moon's angle will be off by 2 fingers at sunrise. Someone else is weeping quietly into a scroll. And the sky? The sky doesn't care. The sky just keeps turning, bright with stars, full of stories, and completely unmoved by royal breakfast requests. You remain on the garden bench for a while longer, the quiet pressing in like a soft wool blanket. Babylon hums at a different frequency now. The frogs have started their night chorus from the canal reeds. Somewhere beyond the city wall, a dog barks once, then thinks better of it. You rise, walking again with no real plan, only the stars as your guide. They're out in full force now. You pause to admire the familiar smear of the Milky Way overhead, though here, in Babylon, it's not called that. The locals call it Iku, the field, or Tamtu, the heavenly river. To them, it's less about cows and more about irrigation. Even the stars, it seems, must earn their keep. You head south, toward the residential quarter's far edge, where the city begins to blend into fields and date groves. It's quieter here. Less light, fewer people, and wider sky. You follow the sound of sandals scraping dust and find a figure seated alone beside a low fire. The man is wrapped in a thin cloak, and beside him, a stack of clay tablets rests under a piece of canvas. He's chewing on something, dried fig, maybe, and scribbling with methodical movements on a slab of clay balanced across his knees. You approach, slowly. He glances up. You like mistakes? You pause. Depends. He gestures to the tablet in his lap. This one's full of them. You sit nearby. The fire crackles softly. The night wraps tighter around the edges of the city. But here, beside this strange scholar and his pile of cosmic leftovers, you feel oddly at ease. I miscalculated, he says, tapping the edge of the tablet. I thought Mars would rise first. It didn't. So I told the bakers to start early. Their bread collapsed. Everyone blamed the flour. He shrugs. You didn't correct them? I'm not a monster. You nod in solidarity. He offers you a date. You accept. Chewy. Sweet. Slight taste of charcoal. You don't mind. This was for a temple feast, he says, showing you another tablet. I mixed up Venus with a passing cloud. Could happen to anyone. Didn't help that the cloud looked smug. You chuckle. The man pokes the fire. Sparks rise and fade into the sky, indistinguishable from the stars for half a second. You know, he says, historians will argue about us someday. About what? Whether we actually believed the stars told us everything, or whether we just liked pretending. You think for a moment. Does it matter? He smiles. Not to me. I'm off kitchen duty now. Another date. Another scribble. He points toward the eastern horizon, where a faint glow is beginning to bloom. Not sunrise. Too early. Just a hint of what's coming. A foreshadowing of gold. You'll see it soon, he says. The goat thing. You blink. I'm sorry? He gestures upward. Constellation. We call it the goat thing, because no one knows what it is. Might be a goat. Might be a confused fish. Could be a god with a drinking problem. You stare at the patch of sky he's pointing toward. A cluster of stars. Not the brightest. Not even the clearest. But yes, they form something. I can see it. You lie. Of course you can. That's part of the magic. The goat thing constellation is mostly forgotten today. Scholars aren't even sure what the Babylonians originally called it. Some suspect it's an early version of Capricornus. Others think it was part of a myth now lost to the dust. What matters more is that they saw it. They named it. They folded it into their schedules and their stories. Whether or not it was a goat, entirely beside the point. The man continues. I used to think I could name a new star, that I'd find one, make a mark. You look at him. Did you? He shakes his head. I misread Mars. Twice. You pat his shoulder. He seems like someone who needed that. You lie back, hands folded under your head. The stars overhead, as sharp as temple carvings. You try to trace your own path through them, but they're not your sky. Not really. They belong to this city, this moment, to a world where stars mean soup, naps, and excuses. Beside you, the man sighs. I once blamed Saturn for forgetting my wife's birthday. Did she believe you? She married me anyway. He tosses another stick onto the fire. You glance again at the goat thing. It's rising now, inch by inch, like a shy actor taking the stage. The man folds his tablet into his satchel. Time to go home. You rise too. Did the goat thing say so? He smiles. No, My back did, but that counts. As he walks away, you stay just a little longer. The stars shift, not dramatically, just enough to tell you it's almost time. For what? You're not sure. But Babylon will let you know. Eventually, when the goat thing smiles, you leave the smoldering fire behind, your feet crunching softly over dry earth and star-shadowed pebbles. The edge of the city feels thinner here, where cultivated land begins to unfurl into open fields, and irrigation canals twist like ink stains across parchment. The stars seem brighter now, closer, even. You almost feel like if you reached up with a long enough reed, you could stir them gently, like soup. Ahead, a fig tree leans at a dramatic angle beside the canal, and next to it, a single, hunched figure, draped in linen and muttering under his breath. He's chewing on something and doesn't stop when you approach. "Seen it?" he asks, without looking up. You pause. "Seen what?" He turns just enough to point skyward. "The tail, near the goat star." You follow his finger, and there it is, a faint streak, silvery and subtle, cutting a diagonal line across the sky like someone scratched a line in wet ink. A comet, fuzzy at the edges, moving too slowly to matter, too quickly to forget. "Unscheduled," he grumbles. You raise an eyebrow. "A problem?" He spits a fig seed into the canal. "Ruined everything." He gestures at the log beside him. You sit. He unfolds a cloth-wrapped bundle. 2 figs, a chunk of bread, a tiny folded chart with angry scratchings. You squint and see a line drawn through a date. Beside it, comet, no barley, no salt. Turns out, comets are bad news in Babylon, especially uninvited ones, especially when they show up during dinner planning. "Last time this happened," he says, "the kitchen staff fasted for 3 days. The fish merchant wailed so loud they gave him a bonus just to stop." You nod solemnly. Comets in ancient Babylon were considered ominous, interruptions in the carefully written cosmic calendar. They didn't fit. They moved wrong. They weren't supposed to be there, and that made them dangerous. Not necessarily in the thunder and lightning way, but in the "we can't have lentils tonight" way, which might be worse, depending on how much you like lentils. The man sighs. "We were preparing mooncakes. Big batch. Now, nothing. No mooncakes, no honey, no flute playing. Just this." He bites a fig as if it personally offended him. You tilt your head. "What's the comet supposed to mean?" He shrugs. No one agrees. "My cousin says it's the ghost of a lost star. My neighbor says it's a goat who got bored of grazing and took off." He pauses. "I prefer the goat." You look up again. The comet glows faintly. Not scary, just inconvenient. He unfolds a second tablet and shows you an emergency schedule. It reads like a to-do list for a very panicked monk. Cancel stew. Tell fishmonger to weep quietly. Move bean deliveries to next week. No singing near wells. Avoid promises. Ignore the goat star. With regret. You point to the last line. "That serious?" He sighs. "It's always the goat star that suffers." The field beyond is quiet, save for a couple of late-night workers walking the canal banks. One stops, notices the comet, and turns slowly around. "See?" the man mutters. "They know." You lie back on the log, hands behind your head, the comet directly in your line of sight now. It doesn't flash or change colors or hum with electricity. It just drifts. Slowly, like a memory passing across your vision that you didn't mean to summon. "Do people ever ignore it?" you ask. He nods. "Sure. Then they drop spoons for a week, or burn the bread twice and swear never to ignore again. Fair enough. Historians still wonder just how seriously the average Babylonian took celestial interruptions. Were comets a full-blown crisis, or just a mildly inconvenient excuse to cancel plans? Some texts suggest widespread panic. Others read more like polite disappointment. But what's clear is that even a faint, fuzzy smear in the sky could ripple downward through dinner, poetry, trade, and yes, lunch schedules. You feel the faintest drop of moisture on your face. You glance up. Is that rain? The man grunts. Do. The comet calls it down sometimes. Likes to pretend it's important. You smile. He repacks his bundle slowly, methodically, then stands. Watch it a little longer, he says. Let it ruin something. Then you'll understand. And with that, he wanders off toward the grove, muttering about goat-shaped apologies. You stay. The comet hangs, still and indifferent. You close your eyes. In the distance, someone is singing. Off-key, probably near a well. You smile wider. The stars are shifting. Not in fear, just making room for their messy guest. And somewhere in a kitchen, a cook crosses out a recipe and writes, "Try again tomorrow, if the sky agrees." You wake beneath a sky so calm, it almost hums. The comet is gone now, either hidden beyond the hills or having wandered off in embarrassment for disrupting dessert. The stars are sharp again. Jupiter glows with his usual certainty. The goat thing is still awkwardly tilting toward the western edge of the sky, like a guest who overstayed the party but brought good snacks, so no one complains. You walk back toward the heart of the city, passing shuttered stalls and folded awnings. A lone cat slinks between baskets. Somewhere, someone's roasting barley for breakfast. You think you hear the word, finally, float through the air, like even the city has been waiting for the comet to leave. You drift into a small courtyard lit by 2 lamps, one flickering, the other burning proudly like it paid extra for better oil. A man sits on the ground with his back against a pillar. His robes are wrinkled. His hair is aggressively unbothered. He's holding a stylus, but he's not writing, just staring upward. You ask, "Forgot your star?" He looks at you, deadpan. "Worse, I mistook Mars for a passing cloud." You nod slowly. "How did that go?" "My wife made the bread anyway." He sighs. "Was it good?" "It was fine, but I was wrong, so it tasted like failure." You sit beside him. He eventually holds up a tablet, flips it over, and on the back is a scribbled mess of dots and lines. You recognize a few: Aldebaran, the Pleiades, maybe even a lazy version of Saturn, but mostly, it's chaos. "I was trying to track moonrise," he says, "but I used last month's pattern and forgot the adjustment for the goat thing's smug drift." You blink. "It drifts smugly?" "Absolutely." He sets the tablet down. "It wouldn't matter. I don't think anyone noticed." You glance at the sky. "But you did." He doesn't reply, just rubs his thumb over a dent in the clay. Historians still argue whether Babylonian scholars ever admitted their mistakes. Most of the surviving records are neat, exacting, and terrifyingly precise. But the absence of error doesn't mean it never happened. It just means that someone, somewhere, had the good sense to bake their failed chart into bread before anyone else read it. The man beside you finally speaks again. There's a pressure in being the one who's supposed to know. You nod. "And then there's Mars," he adds. "Sneaky little glowing liar." A breeze passes. One of the lamps gutters out with a sigh. He laughs. "I once told a whole dinner party that Mercury was going to dance with the moon. Turns out, Mercury was already behind the curtain. The moon danced alone. Everyone applauded anyway. Did anyone call you out?" "My cousin. He's a fisherman. Said the fish knew better. You smile. The other lamp flickers again. The man stands, stretches, and says, I'm going to rewrite the chart. Put a smiley goat near Mars, so I remember not to trust him. You watch him leave. You stay seated, the tablet still warm from his lap beside you. You flip it over. And on the front, a beautifully etched table of positions, months, risings, and disappearances. Every line clean. Every name correct. Even the goat thing is there, just off-center, with a careful little loop that might represent a tale or a joke. You whisper to no one. He didn't really forget. You wander back toward the canal, where the wind is cooler, and the frogs have started a slow, drowsy lullaby again. A reed boat floats nearby, tethered to a stone post. Its surface is scattered with little figurines, tiny carved stars, a fish with wide eyes, a moon that looks like it's trying not to cry. They're toys, probably. Or maybe not. Maybe someone was practicing the sky in miniature, playing their version of Babylonian dollhouse astronomy. You lean closer and spot one last figurine. A man, arms folded, head tilted up. His tablet is pressed to his chest. You exhale slowly. Even clay remembers. The wind shifts again, carrying with it the faint scent of baking. Flatbread rising somewhere. Late-night breakfast begun early. A rooster crows, confused. You take it as a cue. The stars are starting to tilt again. A few are blinking out in the east. The sky's blue curtain is drawing up from behind the hills, stagehands whispering behind the clouds. Soon, the bells will ring. The bread will rise. The stars will fade behind sunlight and laundry and errands. But for now, you sit just a little longer, remembering a scholar who forgot the stars, but only because he loved them too much, and a city that forgave the sky and itself night after night.